Hana Park stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive building in front of her. The Galactic Naval Academy stretched across the horizon like a metal mountain, all silver walls and glowing windows that reflected the three moons, hanging in the purple sky. She had never seen anything so big in her life, not even the space stations around Earth. Her hands gripped the straps of her bag tighter as she walked toward the main entrance with hundreds of other new cadets. Most of the other students did not look like her. There were tall blue beings with 4 arms walking in perfect lines, small furry creatures that hopped instead of walked, and others that looked like walking crystals that made musical sounds when they moved. Hana had studied all the different alien species before coming here, but seeing them in person made her stomach twist with nerves. She was one of only 3 humans accepted into the academy this year, and she could already feel eyes watching her as she moved through the crowd. A group of the crystal beings stopped talking when she passed them. One of them, taller than the others with sharp edges that caught the light, stared at her with what might have been curiosity or disgust. Hana could not tell the difference yet. She kept walking and tried to ignore the way conversations seemed to stop whenever she got close to other groups of cadets. The main hall was even bigger inside than it looked from outside. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above them, and screens floating in the air showed information about room assignments and class schedules. Hana found her name on one of the screens and saw that her roommate was someone called Jiwon Kim. At least that sounded human, which made her feel a little better about everything. Finding her room took almost an hour because the academy was like a small city inside. The hallways went on forever, and there were moving walkways that carried cadets between different sections of the building. Hana got lost twice before she found the right dormitory wing, and by the time she reached her door, she was tired and sweating despite the cool air inside the building. The door opened before she could knock, and a girl about her own age smiled at her from inside the room. She had short black hair and was wearing the same gray cadet uniform that Hana had been given on the transport ship. "You must be Hana," the girl said in perfect English with just a hint of an accent. "I am Jiwon Kim, your roommate. I got here yesterday from Mars Colony." Mars Colony? Hana dropped her bag on the empty bed and looked around the room. It was small but clean, with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window that showed the academy grounds stretching out toward distant mountains. "I thought I was the only human from that far out." "There are 3 of us total this year," Jiwon said, sitting on her bed and pulling her knees up to her chest. "You, me, and a guy named Do-Yun Lee who is studying engineering. The academy accepted exactly 3 humans out of about 10,000 applications from Earth and the colonies." "Why so few?" Hana unpacked her few belongings and put them in the small closet next to her bed. Everything she owned fit easily in the space provided. "Because most species think we are too dangerous," Jiwon said quietly. "They call Earth a death world, because everything there tries to kill you. They think that makes us violent and unpredictable." Hana had heard this before, but it still made her angry. Earth is not that bad. Sure, there are predators and diseases and natural disasters, but humans are not monsters. We just learned how to survive. "Try telling that to the other cadets," Jiwon said. "I went to the dining hall yesterday, and 3 different groups got up and moved to other tables when I sat down. They think we are going to attack them or something." "Have you met this Do-Hyun guy yet?" "Yeah, he seems nice. He is in the engineering track, so we will not see him much except at meals and general assemblies. He said the same thing, though. Everyone treats him like he might explode at any moment." A loud chime sounded through the building, and a voice spoke in several different languages before switching to standard Galactic Common. "All new cadets report to Assembly Hall 7 for orientation in 30 minutes. Attendance is mandatory." Hana and Jiwon looked at each other and then started getting ready to leave. Hana changed into her clean uniform and tried to make her hair look less messy from the long trip. She had never been away from Earth before, and everything here felt strange and foreign. Even the air smelled different, too clean and processed, compared to the wild sense of home. The assembly hall was huge and filled with hundreds of cadets from dozens of different species. Hana and Jiwon found seats near the back, but even there she could feel other students turning to look at them. A few rows ahead, the tall crystal being from earlier glanced back at them with what definitely looked like disapproval. "That is Kira," Jiwon whispered. "She is from Velia Prime and leads one of the top cadet squadrons. I heard she has never gotten anything less than perfect scores on any test or exercise. She does not seem to like us very much. None of them do. They think the Academy made a mistake letting Deathworlders in. A figure walked onto the stage at the front of the hall, and all conversation stopped. Commander Veltar was a Centaurian, tall and elegant with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. His uniform was covered with medals and ribbons that showed he had been in many battles and commanded respect from every species in the galaxy. "Welcome to the Galactic Naval Academy," Commander Veltar said, his voice carrying easily through the huge hall without any amplification. "You are here because you represent the best and brightest of your respective worlds and species. Over the next 4 years, you will learn to work together as officers in the Galactic Defense Force, protecting the peace and prosperity that our alliance has built over centuries." He paused, and his eyes seemed to find Hana in the crowd for just a moment before moving on. "Some of you come from worlds of peace and plenty, where conflict is rare and violence is almost unknown. Others come from more challenging environments that have shaped you in different ways. Regardless of your origins, you are all here for the same purpose, to serve something greater than yourselves." The speech continued for almost an hour, covering rules and expectations and the long, proud history of the Academy. Hana tried to pay attention, but she kept noticing how other cadets would glance at her and whisper to their neighbors. By the time the orientation ended, she felt like she was carrying a heavy weight on her shoulders. Walking back to their room, Jiwon was quiet until they were alone in the hallway. "This is going to be harder than I thought," she said finally. "We just have to prove that we belong here," Hana replied, but even she was not sure she believed it. The looks and whispers made it clear that many of their fellow cadets had already decided that humans did not belong at the Academy. The next 4 years were going to be a long fight, and Hana was not sure she was ready for it. 3 weeks passed at the Academy, and Hana had settled into a routine that felt both familiar and strange. Every morning, she woke before dawn to run laps around the Academy grounds, a habit from her childhood on Earth where staying in shape meant staying alive. The other cadets thought this was odd because most species did not need much physical exercise to maintain their health, but Hana felt restless and anxious if she did not move her body every day. Classes were challenging, but not impossible. Hana found that her brain worked differently than most of her classmates when it came to tactical problems and combat scenarios. Where other species relied on complex calculations and established protocols, she seemed to see patterns and solutions that came from some deeper place she could not explain. Her instructors noticed this too, and while they never said anything directly, she could tell they were surprised by her performance. The real problems started during the practical exercises. In zero-gravity combat simulation, Hana moved through the training modules like she had been born in space, flowing from one position to another with grace that made the other cadets look clumsy by comparison. She completed obstacle courses in record time and scored perfect marks on threat assessment tests that left even the most advanced alien cadets struggling. "It is not natural," she heard one of the Draknari students say to his friends after a particularly difficult exercise where Hana had finished first by a wide margin. "Deathworlders should not be able to adapt so quickly to our technology and methods." The speaker was Thex, a reptilian being with sharp teeth and cold yellow eyes, who came from a warrior culture that prized strength and honor above everything else. His people had been fighting wars for thousands of years, and he clearly did not appreciate being outperformed by what he saw as a primitive human from a backward planet. "Maybe the instructors are giving her easier tests," suggested another voice. This one belonging to Zeph, an aquatic hydran whose blue-green skin always looked wet even in the dry academy air. Or maybe humans are naturally cheating somehow. Hana pretended not to hear these conversations, but Jiwon caught everything and translated the comments made in languages Hana did not understand. The situation was getting worse each day, and it seemed like more cadets were joining the group that wanted the humans removed from the academy. "They are planning something," Do-hyun warned them during one of their rare meals together in a quiet corner of the dining hall. He was a stocky young man with serious eyes who spoke carefully and always seemed to be listening to conversations happening at other tables. "I heard Kira talking to some of her squadron members about teaching the Deathworlders their place." "What kind of teaching?" Jiwon asked, but Do-hyun just shook his head. I could not hear all of it, but it sounded like they want to prove that humans do not belong here by showing everyone how dangerous we really are. That does not make sense, Hana said. If they think we are dangerous, why would they want to provoke us? Because they think our danger comes from losing control, Do-hyun explained. They want to make one of us snap and do something violent so they can point at us and say we told you so. This conversation happened on a Tuesday, and by Friday, things had escalated to the point where Hana was finding her equipment tampered with before important tests. Someone had reprogrammed her practice weapon to misfire during a marksmanship exercise, and her protective suit had been damaged in a way that could have caused serious injury during a pressure simulation. The sabotage was subtle enough that she could not prove who was responsible, but the message was clear. The worst part was how the instructors seemed to ignore what was happening. Professor Quinn, who taught advanced combat theory, acted like he did not notice when other cadets formed, groups that deliberately excluded the humans. Commander Veltar maintained his professional distance from all students equally, but Hana sometimes caught him watching her with an expression she could not read. "They want us to fail," Ji-won said one evening as they studied in their room. She had dark circles under her eyes from stress and lack of sleep. "Every day it gets a little worse, and nobody in authority is going to help us." "Maybe we should report the sabotage," Hana suggested, but even as she said it, she knew it would not work. "Report it to who? And what proof do we have? They are being too careful to leave evidence." Hana looked out their window at the alien landscape beyond the academy walls. 3 moons hung in the purple sky like watching eyes, and she felt homesick for the first time since arriving. On Earth, when someone had a problem with you, they usually told you directly. This subtle campaign of harassment and exclusion was something she did not know how to fight. "There is something else," Ji-won said quietly. "I have been monitoring the Academy communication networks as part of my technical training, and there are messages being sent between certain cadet groups. They are planning something for next week during practical exercises." "What kind of something?" "I cannot tell exactly because they are using coded language, but it involves combat theory class and making sure the humans understand their place in the hierarchy." Hana felt something cold settle in her stomach. She had been trying so hard to fit in and prove that humans could be civilized members of galactic society, but it seemed like no matter what she did, some cadets were determined to see her as a threat that needed to be eliminated. "We should tell Do-hyun," she said finally. "I already did. He says we should be extra careful during any practical exercises and try not to be alone with groups of hostile cadets." "That is going to be hard since most of them are hostile now." The next few days passed slowly, with tension building like pressure before a storm. Hana noticed that Kira and her friends were watching her more carefully during classes, and conversations stopped whenever she entered a room. Even cadets who had been neutral before seemed to be picking sides, and unfortunately most of them were not choosing to support the humans. On Thursday night, Hana could not sleep. She lay in bed listening to Ji-won breathe and thinking about everything that had happened since she arrived at the academy. She had worked so hard to get here, studying for years and passing test after test to prove she was qualified. Her family back on Earth had been so proud when she was accepted, and now she was starting to wonder if she had made a terrible mistake. But another part of her, a deeper and older part that came from growing up on a world where everything wanted to kill you, was getting tired of being pushed around. Humans had not survived on Earth by backing down from threats or trying to appease predators. They had survived by being smart and fast and absolutely ruthless when necessary. Hana had been holding back since arriving at the academy, trying to be the kind of civilized person that would fit in with galactic society. But maybe it was time to stop pretending to be something she was not. Maybe it was time to show these aliens exactly what a Deathworlder could do when pushed too far. She rolled over and closed her eyes, but sleep was still a long time coming. Tomorrow was Friday, and next week would bring whatever Kira and her friends had planned. Hana just hoped that when the time came, she would be ready for it. Monday morning came with gray clouds covering the 3 moons, and Hana felt like something bad was waiting for her. She had barely slept over the weekend, and every shadow in the hallways seemed to hide watching eyes. Ji-won was even more nervous than usual, jumping at small sounds and looking over her shoulder when they walked to classes together. Advanced Combat Theory was their third class of the day, held in a large room with padded floors and walls lined with practice weapons and protective gear. Professor Quinn was a thin centaurian with silver hair who had fought in 3 different wars before becoming an instructor. He usually kept strict control over his classroom, but today he seemed distracted and kept checking his personal communication device. "Today we will practice close-quarters combat scenarios," Professor Quinn announced to the 30 cadets gathered in the training area. "You will work in teams of 5, with one team acting as attackers and another as defenders. The exercise will test your ability to work together under pressure and adapt to changing tactical situations." Hana felt her stomach tighten as the professor began dividing cadets into random groups. She watched as Kira, Thex, Zeph, and Nyx ended up together, along with a nervous Clixian cadet who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. The insectoid being had compound eyes that reflected light in strange patterns, and his 4 arms moved in jerky motions that suggested high stress levels. "Park, you are with Group 7, Professor Quinn said, consulting his tablet. "You will be defending the South training area against Group 3. Group 3 was Kira and her friends. Hana looked around for her teammates, but saw only confused faces among the remaining cadets. It seemed like there had been some kind of mistake with the group assignments, leaving her effectively alone while the others were clustered in their proper teams. "Professor?" called out a Velian cadet from across the room. "The groups are not balanced. Some cadets do not have full teams." Professor Quinn looked up from his device with an expression of mild annoyance. "Work with the assignments you have been given. Adaptation to unexpected circumstances is part of military training." Before anyone could protest further, his communication device chimed urgently. He glanced at it and his expression changed to one of concern. "I need to step out for a few minutes to handle an emergency situation," he said, already moving toward the door. "Continue with the exercise, but keep it simple until I return. No advanced techniques or high-risk maneuvers." The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the cadets alone in the training room. For a moment, nobody moved, and then Kira stood up from where her group had been planning their approach. "Well," she said, her crystalline voice carrying clearly through the room, "it looks like we have a perfect opportunity to conduct a more realistic training scenario." The other groups backed away without being asked, forming a wide circle around the training area where Hana stood alone. She could see calculation in their alien faces, weighing curiosity against self-preservation. Most of them wanted to see what would happen, but none of them wanted to get close enough to be caught in whatever was about to occur. 4 against 1 is not exactly fair, Hana said, trying to keep her voice calm and reasonable. "Maybe we should wait for Professor Quinn to come back and sort out the team assignments properly." 4 against 1 is perfect, Thex replied, his reptilian features twisting into what might have been a smile. "It will give us a chance to see how dangerous Deathworlders really are when they are properly motivated." "This is not about the exercise anymore," Hana realized. "You planned this." "Of course we planned this," Kira said, moving closer with her 3 companions spreading out to surround Hana in the center of the training area. "We are tired of pretending that primitive humans belong in a civilized institution like this academy. Time to show everyone what you really are underneath all that fake politeness." "I do not want to fight you," Hana said, but she was already shifting her weight and calculating distances and angles without conscious thought. Her body was preparing for violence even while her mind still hoped to avoid it. "Too bad," Zeph said, from her left side, his blue-green skin glistening under the training room lights. "Because we want to fight you." The professor said no advanced techniques. Hana tried one last time. "The professor is not here," Nyx clicked in his buzzing insectoid voice. "And what he does not know will not hurt him." Kira moved first, extending a sharp crystalline blade from her arm in a technique that was definitely not approved for training exercises. The blade caught the light as it swept toward Hana's midsection in an arc that would have opened her up from hip to shoulder if it had connected. Time seemed to slow down as Hana's nervous system flooded with chemicals that her ancestors had used to survive encounters with predators that could kill them in seconds. Her vision sharpened until she could see every detail of the attack coming toward her, and her body moved with precision that came from millions of years of evolution on a world where hesitation meant death. She stepped inside Kira's attack, grabbing the crystalline arm and using the alien's own momentum to spin her around and slam her into Thex, who was charging from the opposite direction. Both aliens went down in a tangle of limbs, with Kira's blade scraping harmlessly against the padded wall. Zeph and Nyx attacked together, trying to use their numbers advantage while their teammates were recovering. The aquatic hydrant moved with fluid grace that would have been impressive in water, but on dry land his techniques were slow and predictable. Hana ducked under his grasping arms and drove her elbow into the nerve cluster at the base of his neck, dropping him instantly. Nyx tried to use his 4 arms to overwhelm her, but having more limbs just gave Hana more targets. She caught 2 of his arms, twisted them in opposite directions until joints popped, and then swept his legs out from under him. The insectoid hit the padded floor hard and did not get back up. Thex was back on his feet now, roaring with rage and charging like the predator his species had evolved from. He was bigger and stronger than Hana, with claws that could tear through metal and teeth designed for ripping flesh from bone. But size and strength meant nothing if you could not catch your target. Hana sidestepped his charge and struck the pressure point behind his left ear with surgical precision. The big reptilian stumbled, shook his head, and collapsed as his nervous system temporarily shut down. Kira was the last one standing, her crystalline features reflecting shock and something that might have been fear. She looked around at her fallen teammates and then back at Hana, who was standing calmly in the center of the training area without even breathing hard. "How?" Kira whispered. 12 seconds, Hana said quietly, checking the timer on the wall display. That is how long it took. The training room was completely silent except for the groaning sounds coming from the 4 aliens on the floor. None of them appeared to be seriously injured, but all of them were clearly going to need medical attention. Hana had been very careful to use non-lethal techniques that would incapacitate without causing permanent damage. "Medical emergency in Training Room 7, she said to the Academy's AI system. 4 cadets need immediate attention for training injuries. The other cadets, who had been watching from the edges of the room, pressed themselves back against the walls as she walked past them toward the door. Their faces showed expressions she had never seen before, a mixture of awe and terror that made her feel sick to her stomach. She had tried so hard to fit in, to prove that humans could be civilized members of galactic society. Instead, she had just demonstrated exactly why other species called Earth a death world and its inhabitants living weapons. Everything she had feared would happen had just come true in the worst possible way. Professor Quinn returned just as the medical team arrived to collect his injured students. He took one look at the scene and then at Hana, who was standing by herself near the door while everyone else maintained a careful distance from her. "What happened here?" he asked, but his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Training accident," Hana said simply. 4 cadets were injured during a combat exercise. She did not mention that the exercise had been designed to humiliate and possibly injure her, or that she had shown more restraint than any of her attackers deserved. She did not explain that every move she had made was calculated to neutralize threats without causing permanent harm, or that she could have killed all 4 of them in half the time if she had wanted to. Instead, she just stood there and watched as her classmates were carried away on medical stretchers, knowing that everything had changed and there was no going back to the way things were before. News of the incident spread through the academy faster than Hana had thought possible. By dinner time, every cadet in the building knew that the human girl had put 4 aliens in the medical bay in 12 seconds flat. The stories grew more dramatic with each telling, and by the next morning some cadets were claiming she had used weapons or performed moves that defied the laws of physics. Hana spent most of Tuesday alone in her room, avoiding the stares and whispers that followed her everywhere she went. Jiwon brought her food from the dining hall and updates on the condition of the injured cadets, all of whom were expected to make full recoveries within a few days. The medical staff had been impressed by the precision of Hana's attacks, noting that she had managed to incapacitate 4 opponents without causing any permanent damage. "They are calling for a disciplinary hearing," Jiwon said, sitting on her bed with a worried expression. "Commander Veltar wants to review what happened and decide if you should face formal charges." "What kind of charges?" Hana asked from where she sat by the window, watching maintenance robots tend to the academy, gardens below. Excessive force, violation of training protocols, assault on fellow cadets, the usual stuff they charge people with when fights get out of hand. It was not a fight, Hana said quietly. It was self-defense against an ambush. Try explaining that to the disciplinary board. Half the academy thinks you are a dangerous savage who should be expelled immediately, and the other half is too scared to say anything in your defense. Do-hyun arrived that evening with more disturbing news. He had been monitoring academy communications and security footage, trying to piece together exactly what had happened and who was responsible for setting up the ambush. The good news is that the security cameras caught everything, he said, settling into the chair at Ji-won's desk. The footage clearly shows that Kira and her friends attacked you first, and that you used only defensive techniques to protect yourself. What is the bad news? Hana asked. The bad news is that some faculty members are arguing it does not matter who started it. They say that any human who can do that much damage that quickly is too dangerous to be around other students, regardless of the circumstances. So I am going to be expelled for defending myself against 4 attackers who were trying to injure me seriously enough to prove their point about Deathworlders. Maybe not, Do-hyun said. There is something else happening that might change things. A human admiral arrived this morning for what they are calling a routine inspection, but I think he is really here because of what happened to you. The disciplinary hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning in the Academy's main conference room. Hana spent Wednesday night studying the Academy's code of conduct and trying to prepare answers for the questions she knew they would ask. She had never been in serious trouble before, and the thought of being expelled and sent home in disgrace made her feel sick. The conference room was smaller than she had expected, with a long table where 5 Academy officials sat reviewing documents and footage of the incident. Commander Veltar was in the center, flanked by Professor Quinn and 3 other instructors that Hana recognized but had never spoken to directly. At the far end of the room, a human in Admiral's uniform sat quietly observing the proceedings. "Cadet, Park," Commander Veltar began, his voice formal and carefully neutral. "You are here to answer questions about the incident that occurred in Advanced Combat Theory class 2 days ago. 4 of your fellow cadets were injured and required medical treatment as a result of your actions. Do you understand the seriousness of these charges?" "Yes, sir," Hana replied, standing at attention in front of the panel. "Please describe in your own words what happened during the training exercise." Hana recounted the events as accurately as she could, starting with the strange group assignments and Professor Quinn's sudden departure from the classroom. She explained how Kira and her friends had surrounded her and made it clear that they intended to provoke a fight regardless of her wishes. She described each moment of the 12-second encounter in detail, emphasizing that she had used only non-lethal techniques and could have caused much more serious injuries if she had chosen to do so. "At any point did you consider retreating or calling for help instead of engaging in combat?" asked one of the instructors. "There was nowhere to retreat to, sir. They had me surrounded, and Professor Quinn was not available to intervene. I used the minimum force necessary to protect myself from serious injury." "Minimum force?" Professor Quinn spoke up. "You incapacitated 4 cadets in 12 seconds. Most species would consider that excessive force under any circumstances." "Most species did not evolve on Earth," the human admiral said quietly, from his position at the end of the table. "Perhaps I can provide some context that might be helpful to this proceeding." Commander Veltar nodded. "Please proceed, Admiral Suzuki." Admiral Kento Suzuki stood and activated a holographic display that showed star charts and intelligence reports. He was an older man with gray hair and scars on his hands that suggested he had seen real combat during his career. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected unusual activity along the galactic rim, he began. "Ships moving in formations we do not recognize, using technology that appears to be significantly more advanced than anything in our current databases. We have reason to believe that first contact with this new species may not be peaceful." The room was completely silent as the implications of this statement sank in. First contact scenarios were always dangerous, but the possibility of encountering a hostile advanced civilization was something that kept military planners awake at night. "Our tactical analysis suggests that traditional galactic military doctrine may be insufficient to deal with this potential threat," Admiral Suzuki continued. "We need officers who can think differently, adapt quickly, and make decisions under extreme pressure. That is why we recommended that the Academy begin accepting qualified candidates from Earth and other challenging worlds. You are saying that the humans were admitted specifically because they come from a dangerous planet? Commander Veltar asked. I am saying that the galaxy may soon need the kind of survival instincts and tactical flexibility that only come from growing up in a truly hostile environment. Cadet Park's performance in that training room was not a bug in human nature. It was a feature that we may need more of in the coming years. Admiral Suzuki turned to look directly at Hana. 12 seconds to neutralize 4 attackers without causing permanent injury shows exactly the kind of precision and restraint that makes a good officer. Most humans would have either hesitated too long and been seriously hurt, or responded with enough force to kill their attackers. Cadet Park found the perfect balance between protecting herself and minimizing harm to others. What about the other cadets? Professor Quinn asked. How are we supposed to maintain discipline and safety if students are afraid of their human classmates? The same way we maintain discipline when we have Draknari cadets who could tear most species apart with their bare claws, or Centaurian cadets whose mental abilities could drive other beings insane if misused, Admiral Suzuki replied. We teach them to control their abilities and use them responsibly, which is exactly what Cadet Park did. Commander Veltar studied the footage of the incident one more time, watching as Hana moved with fluid precision to disable her attackers without causing unnecessary harm. When he looked up, his expression had changed from disapproval to something that might have been grudging respect. The charges against Cadet Park are dismissed, he announced. The 4 cadets who initiated the confrontation will face disciplinary action for assault and violation of training protocols. Cadet Park, you are free to return to your regular class schedule. Furthermore, Admiral Suzuki added, Cadet Park and her fellow humans will be transferred to the Advanced Tactical Program, where their unique skills can be properly developed and channeled. The galaxy is changing, and we need officers who can change with it. As Hana left the conference room, she felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She was still not sure how the other cadets would react to her now, but at least she knew that someone in authority understood what had really happened and why it mattered. The road ahead would still be difficult, but maybe it would lead somewhere worth going after all. The weeks following the disciplinary hearing brought changes that Hana had not expected. The Advanced Tactical Program was smaller and more intense than regular classes, with only 15 cadets selected from the entire academy. Besides Hana, Jiwon, and Do-Yun, the group included cadets from 7 different species who had shown exceptional promise in strategic thinking and crisis management. What surprised Hana most was that Kira had requested to join the program after being released from the medical bay. The tall crystalline being approached Hana during their first advanced tactics class, moving with the careful precision of someone who was still recovering from injuries. I owe you an apology, Kira said, her voice lacking the arrogance that had marked their previous encounters. And an explanation. You do not owe me anything, Hana replied, though she was curious about what had prompted this change in attitude. Yes, I do. I spent 3 days in the medical bay thinking about what happened, and I realized something important. You could have killed me. Hana nodded slowly. Yes, I could have. But you did not. Even when I was attacking you with a crystalline blade that could have cut through your spine, you chose to incapacitate me instead of eliminate me. That is not the action of a savage or a monster. That is the action of someone who was raised to protect people, not hurt them. Exactly, Kira said. My people come from a world where violence is almost unknown. We have lived in peace for so long that we forgot what it means to face real danger. When we heard that Deathworlders were coming to the Academy, we imagined mindless brutes who would destroy everything we had built. Instead, you got someone who spent 12 seconds proving that violence can be controlled and directed with precision. I am beginning to understand that there is a difference between being capable of violence and choosing to use it, Kira said. Your people learned that difference because they had to. Mine never had that opportunity. This conversation marked the beginning of a gradual shift in how the Academy cadets viewed their human classmates. It helped that Admiral Suzuki had remained at the Academy for several weeks, observing classes and making it clear that the humans were there by specific design rather than accident. His presence sent a message that could not be ignored. The galactic military leadership believed that Deathworld conditioning was not a liability, but an asset. The advanced tactical program pushed all the cadets to their limits, presenting scenarios that had no clear solutions and required creative thinking under extreme pressure. Hana found that her Earthborn instincts served her well in these exercises, but she also learned valuable lessons from her alien classmates about cooperation and strategic planning. During one particularly challenging simulation, her team was tasked with defending a civilian station against an overwhelming enemy force with limited resources and no possibility of reinforcement. Most military doctrine would have called for evacuation or surrender, but Hana suggested a different approach. "What if we do not try to defend everything at once?" she proposed during the planning phase. "What if we give up non-essential areas and concentrate our forces where they can do the most damage to the attackers?" "That would mean abandoning parts of the station to enemy occupation," objected a Centaurian cadet named Velrune. "Temporarily," Hana corrected. "We let them take what they think they want, then hit them when they are spread out and vulnerable. My people call it tactical retreat." "It sounds like cowardice," said another cadet. "It sounds like survival," Do-hyun interjected. "Sometimes the best way to win is to make your enemy think they are winning until you are ready to prove them wrong." The simulation proved that Hana's approach could work, but only if executed with perfect timing and absolute trust between team members. It required the kind of coordination that came from shared hardship and mutual respect, qualities that the mixed species team was still developing. "Interesting strategy," their instructor commented after reviewing the results. "Unorthodox, but effective. Where did you learn to think like that, Cadet Park?" "From growing up on a world where everything wants to kill you," Hana replied. "You learn to use your enemy's strength against them, or you do not survive long enough to have children." As the months passed, Hana noticed that other cadets were beginning to seek out the humans for advice on tactical problems and crisis scenarios. What had started as fear and suspicion was gradually transforming into respect and curiosity. The change was not universal. Some cadets still maintained their distance and whispered about Deathworlder savagery, but it was significant enough to make daily life much more pleasant. The real test came during the annual Academy War Games, where teams of cadets competed in complex scenarios designed to simulate real military operations. Hana found herself selected as a team leader, commanding a mixed group that included Kira, Thex, and several other cadets who had once considered her a threat to Academy safety. "I want everyone to understand something before we begin," Hana told her team during their first planning session. "We are not here to prove that any one species is superior to the others. We are here to show that different kinds of thinking can work together to solve problems that none of us could handle alone." "What do you need from us?" Thex asked. The big reptilian had been surprisingly cooperative since the medical bay incident, apparently having gained respect for Hana's fighting abilities and tactical restraint. "I need you to do what you do best," Hana replied. "Kira, your people are natural strategists who can see patterns and connections that others miss. Thex, your warrior culture gives you insights into enemy psychology and motivation. Everyone on this team has skills that come from their homeworld and their species. My job is to coordinate those skills, not replace them." The war games lasted 3 days and involved scenarios ranging from space battles to ground combat to diplomatic negotiations. Hana's team faced challenges that tested every aspect of their training, and they succeeded by combining human adaptability with alien expertise in ways that surprised even their instructors. During the final scenario, they were tasked with rescuing hostages from a heavily defended enemy position while minimizing casualties on both sides. The solution required Hana to use her close combat skills to create a distraction, while Kira coordinated a complex technological assault, and Thex led a flanking maneuver that took advantage of his species' natural stealth abilities. 12 seconds, Kira noted with satisfaction as they completed the mission. "That seems to be your optimal engagement time." "Long enough to get the job done, short enough to avoid unnecessary complications," Hana agreed. The war games concluded with an awards ceremony where Admiral Suzuki presented commendations to the most outstanding cadets. Hana's team received recognition for tactical innovation and interspecies cooperation. But the real victory was less formal and more important. "You know," Thex said as they walked back to the dormitories after the ceremony, "when I first heard that Deathworlders were coming to the Academy, I thought it meant the end of civilized military service. "What do you think now?" Jiwon asked. "Now I think it means the beginning of something new," he replied. "Something that might be necessary if we are going to face the challenges that Admiral Suzuki has been hinting about." 6 months later, Hana stood in the same assembly hall where she had first heard Commander Veltar speak about serving something greater than yourself. This time, she was not a nervous new cadet trying to find her place in an alien world. She was an upperclassman preparing to welcome a new group of humans who would face the same challenges and opportunities that she had encountered. "Remember," she told Jiwon and Dohyun as they waited for the new arrivals to enter the hall, "we are not here to prove that humans are better than anyone else. We are here to prove that being different can be a strength instead of a weakness." The doors opened, and 20 new human cadets filed in, looking just as nervous and out of place as Hana had felt on her first day. She could see the uncertainty in their faces and the way they clustered together for comfort in an environment that felt completely foreign. "Welcome to the Galactic Naval Academy," she said, stepping forward to address the newcomers while hundreds of alien cadets watched from the surrounding seats. "You are here because the galaxy needs what you have to offer. You are going to face challenges and prejudices that will test everything you believe about yourself and your place in the universe." She paused and looked around the assembly hall, meeting the eyes of cadets from dozens of different worlds and species. Some watched with curiosity, others with respect, and a few with lingering suspicion. But none of them looked at her with the fear and hostility that had marked her early days at the academy. "But you are not alone," she continued. "You have each other, and you have allies among your fellow cadets who understand that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. The humans who came before you learned that lesson, and now it is your turn to teach it to others." As the new cadets settled into their seats and Commander Veltar began his welcome address, Hana felt a sense of completion that she had not expected. She had come to the academy hoping to prove that humans deserved a place among the civilized species of the galaxy.